There, macro folks. This is Mr. Hooker, and this is video number 2 for savings, investment, and the financial system. So let's get to it. Oops, that's not going. So there is your supply of loanable funds. At low interest rates, we the excuse me, we the people would not want to supply many funds. We don't want to put funds in the bank. It's just that simple. We'll keep our money elsewhere rather than put it in savings. At high interest rates, we are going to want to put money in savings because we want those funds. We want that interest rate, right? We'd like to make a little money on something. So why does it slope upward? Loanable funds are supplied by the savers. By saving money today and earning interest, we're rewarded with higher consumption in the future. You get a little more money in your account, albeit right now at today's rates, not a whole lot. So more people are willing to forego current consumption to make a loan to a borrower when the interest rate is higher. We will take that future consumption. So equilibrium interest rate, which is R star, and the total quantity of lending, which is Q star, are determined by the intersection of the supply and demand curves at point E. So your equilibrium right now, that would be, in this case, 8% interest and $300. Love that 8% interest. Um, so at that point, and this is a nice little um, thing here. Where is my, there it is. So right here, only projects that are profitable at an interest rate of 8% or higher are funded. And technically, if they're profitable at 8%, they're not going to get done because that's breaking even. You're not going to borrow at 8% to run a project that's only going to make you 8% because you're not guaranteed that 8% project, right? So really you need projects that are going to make 8.5, 9, 10, 11, 12 on up. And so that's going to go the way that works out. That's going to be the way that works out for us. The equilibrium interest rate is the interest rate at which the quantity of loanable funds supplied equals the quantity of loanable funds demanded. So market for loanable funds matches up desired savings with desired investment spending. So it's efficient. So it's another efficient market, is what we're saying in all of that. Um, right investments get made, projects with higher payoffs get financed. The right people do the savings and lending. So those who are willing to lend for lower interest rates get to save and lend. So, what are the things that cause the demand curve for loanable funds to shift? One, changes in perceived business opportunities. So during the dot-com bubbles of the 90s, businesses rushed to buy computers, which shifted the demand curve for loanable funds to the right. In '01, when it bust, the demand for loanable funds shifted back to the left. Changes in government borrowing. In '09, the federal government was running a budget deficit in the excess of $1.4 trillion. That's trillion with a T, ladies and gentlemen. So what does that happen? What does that do? So that shifts the demand curve to the right, which is basically going to increase the interest rate and the quantity. So let me go back to that. So you see also, they mentioned the rise in equilibrium interest rate, but it also increases the quantity of loanable funds. So demanded. So if they're not supplied, that's a problem. Shifts for the demand curve for loanable funds also causes some crowding out if the government budget deficit drives up the interest rate. Um, so we teach this in econ. I've, been doing it for a while. Crowding out may not occur in the economy if the economy is depressed, just because people aren't going to be borrowing so much. So government, during a recession, the government is going to be spending a ton of money, right? Um, Fiscal policy, we haven't gotten there yet, but the government's going to be spending a ton of money due to fiscal policy. They're going to be borrowing a lot of that money. But then again, private people are not going to be taking out loans and really they're not going to be taking out loans because banks ain't going to be making those loans. Banks are very hesitant to make loans during a recession to private individuals. So the government taking out the loan, using that money in the loanable funds market really isn't a problem there because that money's got to go to somebody, right? Um, so government spending can lead to higher incomes. Those higher incomes lead to increased savings, which allows the government to borrow without raising the interest rates. So basically, the government borrows money. The government sends people checks. You remember the stimulus checks of 2020. Um, People put that money in savings. The checks I talked about from 2000. One of the things that happened by the time they came out, the economy was down. People put that money in savings. So if the economy's down, people don't really spend it as much as you would think. They put a lot of it in savings, or at least a good portion of it, and that actually causes more lending. So, yay. Large budget deficits the U.S. government ran from 2008 to 2013 in the face of the Great Recession, um, caused a little, if any, crowding out. And that's the point I was going to make up top is so we talk about crowding out in economics like it's this great big boogeyman. In reality, crowding out, and I've seen it in papers and presentations, crowding out's about 1%. It ain't no thing. So don't read crowding out and think, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. It's not. 1 to 1.5%, I think, is what it is. So it's okay. We'll be fine. Shifts in the supply of loanable funds, factors that cause the supply curve for loanable funds to shift, is changes in private saving behavior. Uh, from April to February, following the coronavirus, the personal savings rate, saving as a percentage of disposable income, decreased from 5 to 33%, um, which shifted the supply curve. I think they mean from 33% to 5. You don't decrease from 5 to 33. So I think they mean from 33 to 5. So changes in net capital inflows. When Greece adopted the euro as its currency, investors believed that Greece was a safe place to put their funds. Oh, you got fooled. And Greece experienced large net capital inflows, which shifted the supply curve to the right. By 2009, worries about the Greek government's solvency led to a collapse in investor confidence, and net inflows dried up. So, for those that don't know, never followed that whole thing, Greece had this crazy little time right around there where, like, hey, we're going to use the euro. No, we're not going to use the euro. Yeah, we're going to use the euro. No, we're not going to use the euro. Maybe we're going to use the euro, but maybe we're not. We don't really know. And their whole economy was a flippin' mess that whole time through. So around that time, and it was like 2009, 2010, around that time, I was at Central Community College over in Nebraska, and our choir was going to Greece to perform, and they didn't know what currency to get because Greece was doing this whole flip flop with the euro and whatever their local currency was at the time. Our students truly did not know what currency to get before the trip. Um, it was insane. So yeah, Greece was doing some crazy things back then. Their economy was a mess. I think they're a little more stable now, but they're still like a little bit of a mess. Um, Increase in the supply of loanable funds. So increase in the supply of loanable funds basically leads to a fall in the equilibrium interest rate, and as you can see, also a increase in the quantity of loanable funds. All right. Global market for loanable funds. All right, so capital flows from countries with low interest rates to countries with high interest rates. Basically, if you're doing this thing for the world, people are going to search out high interest rates. That's the way it works. We're a global economy. Search out those high interest rates. So capital flows raise interest rates where they were low, reduce interest rates where they were high. So basically, over time, everything kind of gets evened out. Not as much as you would really maybe think, but it kind of evens them out because not everybody is going to be global. Hey, there's some things to that. So when the international capital flows are so large, they equalize interest rates across countries. The global loadable funds market arises. That's really not as easy to say as it sounds. All right, international capital flows in a two-country world. Equilibrium interest rates 6% in the U.S. market, but 2% in British markets. That's an incentive for capital to flow from Britain to the U.S. So we're at 6%, they're at 2%, right? So money's going to flow from from Great Britain to the U.S. and we should equalize at about 4%, right? So Britain lends the U.S., leading to equalization of interest rates at 4% in both countries. At that rate, the U.S. borrows more than it lends. Difference is made up by those inflows. So that's where we go. And hopefully everybody understood how I got to the 4% before I got to this slide. Um, it's just the difference between the 6 and the 2. It's that middle point between the 6 and the 2. Let's say that. That's the equilibrium international rate. So the capital inflows to the U.S., outflows from Britain, and that's where we are. Inflation and the interest rates. So anything that shifts either the supply of loanable funds curve or the demand for loanable funds curve changes the interest rate. So major changes in interest rates have a lot of factors to them. Changes in government policy, technological innovation, uh, expectations about inflation. So your real interest rate is your nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. Really simple. So you've got a nominal interest rate that you're always going to pay, right? Then the bank has factored into that the inflation rate, and that gives them the real interest rate. So the true cost of borrowing and payoff to lending is the real interest rate. But nobody knows what the inflation is going to be, so loan contracts specify the nominal interest rate. But take that nominal interest rate has inflation baked in. So when you take that, so let's say that you borrowed money at 6%. And you anticipated inflation would be 3%. The bank anticipated inflation would be 3%. So the real interest rate on your loan is 3%. But inflation turns out to be 2%, which means the real interest rate on your loan, instead of being 3%, is now 4%. Yay, to the bank. But if the inflation rate turned out to be 5%, as it's been recently, well, the bank got 1% real interest. That sucks for them. But hey, you're only going to ever pay what the nominal interest rate is. They can't come back and say, hey, we'd like more interest. No, you don't. Have a nice day. Kick rocks, buddy. All right. All figures drawn with the vertical axis measures the nominal, and then that's the way that works. So prices are always on vertical. According to the Fisher effect, increase in expected future inflation drives up the nominal interest rate, leaving expected real interest rate unchanged. So basically, if the tide rises, boats still float on the surface. So expected real interest rates unaffected by changes in future inflation. There you go. Demand for loanable funds at 10% expected inflation. Supply of loanable funds at 10% expected inflation. There, that's at 14. So there you go. But your regular one right now is still at 4. So financial system, uh, actually, this is going to get deep. So we're going to stop right here and I will get deep into these weeds in video number 3.